Welcome to She Been Ready, the podcast. She Been Ready is a conversation, a declaration, and a clarification that Black women have always led. On this podcast, I, Dr. Wendy Williams, educator, psychologist, leader, and auntie, will be joined by Black women who lead and those who have been led well by them. So, you don't have to get ready when you stay ready, and you can trust in the leadership of a Black woman because she been ready. All right, so welcome back to She Been Ready, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Wendy Williams, and as we know, these are some of the most prescient and necessary conversations of the day, and I'm so incredibly grateful to have my dear, dear sister friend, kindred spirit, fellow East Bayer, Dr. Ife Udoh, join me. Dr. Ife
Hello.
Is
Hello.
that, you like that?
Yeah.
Dr. Ife is a public health professional. She is a mother. She is a friend. She is a sister. She is a colleague. She is someone with just a very deep and enriched perspective around our collective accountabilities to one another in health and in wellness, and how to address issues of incredible disparity inside of systems that are pretty ambivalent around what equity really looks like in this space. But she's deep in the trenches, has been for many years all over the globe. And the work, therefore, is both very, expansive, but also very personal. And that's where we sort of dive into and gather in this conversation. What you all are going to experience with this conversation with Dr. Ife and I is us lifting out literally a conversation we've had in a number of ways across a number of dinner tables and glasses of wine with her beautiful baby girl running around and getting our attention and jumping on Auntie Wendy's back and just doing stuff as we were trying to be in this space together and talking about and really reflecting on the leadership of motherhood. The leadership of motherhood. And so that is the space, that is the work that we are looking at and thinking about. And one of the things that I want us to grapple with as we're in the conversation is whether it's the leadership or motherhood, or is it the mothership as leader, the motherhood as leadership? And so, and what the difference is even between those phrasings. So Dr. Ife, I just want to give you a very, very warm and just loving welcome to the space with me. I'm so grateful for you. I'm just so grateful for you, and so grateful that you've allowed yourself to do this with me. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You know, we go a ways, and I have so much respect for you and love for you, and the way you've loved upon not only my kid but on other members of my family. So
I do love your family.
Yeah. So I'm and they are not an easy family to love. So I'm happy to
You're so funny. I love your family. We are not shading the siblings.
We're not shading the siblings.
That's
not shade.
I know,
that's
I
about
know.
acknowledging.
That's about acknowledging the truth of it.
Yeah, that's about acknowledging a deep truth about
that's right.
Who we are and how we grew up, and the redefining of love that I think we've all had to do for ourselves in our relationships, in our family, and in our relationships outside of our family. So that's what that's more about, for sure.
And the courageous work to do that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
Like you have to really take a risk and leap out and do it anyway, even when you're afraid, you're not sure.
That's right.
So yeah, that's so we're entering the space with love, y'all. That's what you can tell even from that intro.
There's so much there.
There's so much. So Ife, one of the first questions that we ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, how did you know that you've been ready? And everybody is coming from such different and diverse perspectives. And so we really want to have a sense from you of how you knew you were ready, how you knew that you were ready to start doing or engaging the work that that is at your calling, and which you decided to take a leadership stance inside of, where you felt you maybe needed to be at the helm or needed to take a more active or center role or guiding role. I think it's really important, particularly for folks coming up and through educational pathways and just professional transitions, to also know, how old we were, what stage of our career, what we say we were in, what was happening for you in that space.
Mm. It's a loaded question
Yeah,
because I
all of the
think
questions are locked and loaded. Just
yeah,
FYI.
loaded. I think because I think the getting ready, the being ready, the been ready is like a continuum. It's a journey, right? I'm sure so many folks have spoken to it in that way. I come out of traditional, non-traditional meldings across the like continuum of my life. Everything from being a first generation daughter of African descent to like working as a public health researcher in a non-academic setting, which has always been something that I strove for in my career, was intentional about that, even when I didn't know I was being intentional, but it was clear that I needed to be intentional because the academy was never a good fit for me, even when I was there in and out of it. And because I've chosen that path or been put on that path of, the integration of the traditional and the non-traditional, there's never really been a guidepost for that. I feel like there's a lot more opportunity for that sort of merging of traditional and non-traditional thinking in public health as a researcher, in the space of health equity, in the space of mothering. But there were never any guideposts for that, right? Like in many ways, I was either told things along the continuum of not having enough skills, not being able to write, not being able to sort of think in these more conceptual ways, to now leading, like multi-million-dollar efforts in public health, and seeing myself along the continuum of that path, and the things that I've had to learn from every one of those experiences along that journey has been incredibly helpful. Has also been harmful, also has taken a bit of that like shattering and like rebuilding work, right? Along the continuum, personally and professionally. Takes a lot of layers of thick skin. I started young, right? Like, you know this. I started young. I started my my graduate journey quite young. I was in my early 20s. And then once that work finished, I did not pursue the traditional sort of graduate work to postdoc work that you do. I got on a plane and moved to Atlanta and worked.
And that when I met you?
And that's when we met, right? I got on a plane and moved to Atlanta. I had an opportunity to go work at the CDC, right when the global AIDS program there was rolling out under President Bush. And it was a hugely important part of my learning, just being in federal space with all of these brilliant thinkers who are also like, in and of themselves, government people who are like stacked with the bureaucracy of trying to create change within a system that doesn't allow for change. And being a young person and seeing all that was eye-opening, and set me on this sort of journey of thinking about, well, what is the change that you have the ability and other people have the ability to do within these systems? I think that's where the original question started for me, but I always knew that it wasn't going to be in these traditional senses. I always knew it was not going to be in an academic sense, or in a way that wasn't like really connected to the people that I feel are central in the story of thinking about public health. And I center the stories of people and community and public health along every single one of the journeys that I've been on. It's the stories that matter. And sometimes those stories don't translate in the ways that we think about what public health should look like. But I think people are starting to pay attention to how important those stories are now, particularly because of COVID. The
Mm-hmm,
COVID
mm-hmm,
story is one that everybody in this generation is going to remember, right?
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
That was a lot,
Ooh.
Ife. We're about to go deep. I hope everybody put on your seatbelt, y'all. This is not just a walk around the corner. We're going in. We're going in. Wow. Can you hear me okay?
I can. And is
Okay.
that me clicking or you clicking?
I
I'm
think
making
that
sure.
might be your beeping. But it's also fine. Okay. I guess one of the things that I heard in there, Ife, that I just want to lift out is the ways in which you were made to feel inadequate, and the way that imposter syndrome was, you know, when you talk about writing and speaking and just expression, and whether or not, you know, you have a real readiness, whether or not an opportunity or an organization can hold your sense of readiness. You came out of one of the best schools in the country. So the fact that you would enter into a space or be in these spaces, constantly doubting, constantly doubting. And with that, right?
For years,
and
constant.
For years. I did not realize that about you, but how could you not, right? Just because that's what it means to be a Black woman in these spaces. And also what we are learning about COVID, in that we needed scholars and practitioners and scientists like you, whose version and ways of engaging the work might not have felt or been seen as scientific, but now are the only ways that we are really able to access and know, like, why folks are not taking the vaccine, for example. I know it was a big public health conundrum, or what needs to be said, you know, how Dr. Fauci needs to frame a message, why people would get so adamant around the mask, and how the political divisions sort of interface with that. But what is the public health impetus of this thing or that thing? And we've watched that happen in real time. We've watched that machinery have to adjust and get very culturally competent really fast. And also deal with the embedded racism and just classism and, you know, nihilism, xenophobia that pervades our society, our culture, our country, relative to questions about disease and who is well and who is not, and who is worth helping, saving, protecting, inoculating, and who is right. Like,
I mean, I don't even know what else I'm supposed to say. Like, those are all of the things, and those are the questions that I have always like felt called to be attached to, right? Like, and those are in many ways non-traditional, and now moving into this traditional space of thinking about public health, right?
This is exactly what I'm saying. Like, what if you had walked away from the field, and right now you are the type of scholar and scientist and public health practitioner in the field, in the world, that we actually need to understand how to move. I've watched some of these predominantly white men, whether in the journalistic or public health scientific space, just not know what to do, because what they're experiencing in the wider public, when we're thinking about it, including everybody, which is what you have to do when you have a public health emergency like a pandemic, not understand culturally what's going on to even know how to intervene. And then enter here you. So I just feel like, wow, like, the fact that you were made to feel like such an imposter, and now that imposters, the knowledge and perspectives and questions that cause one to bring up imposter notions to you and made you feel like one, is exactly what we need in order to survive this thing.
And I do want to clarify that I have not been as entrenched in the COVID public health sort of work, because honestly, like there are other public health crises that are still taking place and have always been taking place. And I think what sometimes public health and or systems around sort of, you know, what's the next tend to do is they tend to do a brain drain effect. I saw some of that when I worked internationally, right? There was this huge brain drain effect of what it looked like for public health researchers who were working domestically to start moving into the more international and developmental space, and then public health researchers that are, you know, native to their communities in these international settings get other jobs and then leave like their countries and go outside of their countries, right? So then you have these brain drain effects happening in countries like South Africa or Zambia or Namibia, where people are like, oh, I've gotten this training because now I've like seeded my work in this way in HIV, and there's been all this opportunity around HIV, and now I can take this and go anywhere I want. And so there's been this like circular brain drain effect that you see in public health that I find really interesting. I think some of that happened with COVID. It had to happen, right? Like you needed like the epi folks from HIV who understand disease context and prevalence and thinking about infectious diseases to naturally shift into that world. You needed medical providers who have worked in infectious disease and primary care to shift into that. But also what we're starting to, I think, pay attention to is that has created an incredible depth of brain drain on our public health system that was never systemically strong enough to take this on anyways.
In the first
place. So